Breaking news! As you already know, we're coming to Denver for the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival. And if you haven't already snagged those tickets, act fast and use our promo code COVEN to save 15%. But we have even more big news, party people.
Yes, we do. We will be in Denver early for a live show on Wednesday, July 10th. 2024 at the O Theater.
Oh!
Doors are at 7. The show is at 8. We will have merch. And we will have a VIP Q&A to follow.
Oh.
And you might recall the last time we did a live show in Denver.
Well, I hope you do recall, because I barely do.
I recall. You might not recall.
I barely recall.
The last time we were in Denver, we
flew too close to the sun.
We activated
Yep.
fully. So that was a trip.
Literally.
So this one is bound to be just as wild, but maybe slightly less messy because our tolerance is much higher these days.
I'm high right now. So get your tickets before they sell out. Head to wineandcrimepodcast.com for that sweet, sweet link and more information.
We'll see you on July 10th in Denver, baby.
Wine and Crime contains graphic and explicit content which may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
You are listening to Wine and Crime, the podcast where two friends chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash their worst Minnesotan accents.
Oh, sure.
I'm Amanda.
Oh, I'm Lucy. Definitely some Midwestern accents this week.
Oh, yeah. Everything about this I've infused with local flavor.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, we should tell the people what we're talking about. Because this week, we have a very special Gals Pick brought to you by us that I definitely didn't misunderstand, but Lucy will set it straight, called Farm Crisis Crimes.
What did you interpret this as? What does that mean to you?
A crisis financially on a farm that led to something bad.
Okay.
Is
but
that
not
kind
at a specific point in time?
In the 80s.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Okay, so this was right.
Yeah.
Great.
The farm crisis.
Yeah, I just don't really talk about the farm crisis that much.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for.
Great. Okay, good. I feel better about it now.
Background, baby.
Oh, God bless.
I'll answer all of your burning questions about the farm crisis of the 1980s.
I do have burning questions. But first, before we dive into your very much needed segment, because apparently I did understand the assignment without realizing I understood the assignment, so I definitely don't quite understand the crisis.
Is that like double misunderstanding?
I feel like it's one of those double negatives where it actually creates a positive, like it balances out. So I'm
proud of you.
Thank you. I'm a star.
Mm-hmm.
But this week I have paired this episode with a local wine because, you know, I have a local case coming, and I wanted to also feature a local wine. This is from Rustic Roots. It's their 2022 Itasca, Minnesota dry white wine. And this is all grown and made right here in our beautiful state. This is one of their newer cold hardy grape varietals to be developed by the University of Minnesota. Itasca is making waves in the Midwest wine scene for its complexity and ability to balance dryness and acidity. It's unassuming in the glass. It has a pale lemon like colored hue to it, and it packs a punch on the nose and palate. You're going to get aromas and Flavors of grapefruit zest, Bartlett pear, white peach, juicy pineapple.
Did you say this was a white blend?
It's a singular grape, Itasca. It's a grape that the U of M developed to be a cold, hardy wine grape that can grow here.
I like it.
Yeah.
The great white North grape.
The grape white North. It's also balanced with notes of gardenia, grass, whetstone, and netty almond.
I love a whetstone.
I do too. Petrichor. The high acidity balanced by the multitude of fruit characteristics is rounded out by just a touch of oak aging for texture. Dry and refreshing, this wine is the perfect pairing. Oh my God, I love these recommendations. With an afternoon spent in a hammock.
Oh,
goat cheese.
Oh my God.
Creamy shrimp Alfredo.
Stop. You're describing my ideal day.
I know. And seared scallops with a beurre blanc sauce. All perfect partners for our Itasca.
God.
The bottle retails at $31, which is a little, it's a little higher on the gal's price range, but I'll take it. Most restaurants that have it by the glass will sell it for around $8. She's 12.2% ABV, and she is a popper. It's produced and bottled by Rustic Roots Winery in Scandia, Minnesota. Family-owned vineyard. So fun.
I like it. It sounds delicious.
It does sound delicious. Should we try it? She is a popper, so you need your Wine and Crime wine key from wineandcrimepodcast.bakersdoll.com. Take it. Get open. Because that's the only wine key that will ever work to open wine.
This bottle is exclusive.
Yeah, it's exclusive. Are you sipping on anything today? You
Just
sucking on any chili dogs? Oh!
I feel like it's early. I gotta go pick up June.
Yeah, I get it.
No booze for me quite yet.
You don't want to be in the pickup line smelling like boars.
Not yet anyway. It's just her first week of daycare.
Oh God. Yeah, let's make a good impression for a little bit.
We'll stave that off as long as possible.
That's a good idea. Well, I'll drink for you.
Yes. Please.
All right. Let's pop this bad boy open.
I'm ready.
Oh! There's a nice pap for you.
Local pap.
Local pap. Farm to table pap. Hopefully no crisis.
Pap. I said crap.
U of M crap pap. All right. Before we dive into your incredible information that will reaffirm that I actually accidentally did the right thing this week, should we take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I have a tried and true system for knowing when I need to shave my legs, and that is when my leg hair is so long that it's getting caught like in the fibers of my clothes.
You can braid it.
Yeah, and I get that urge maybe 3 times a year, but I was always dreading it because I have really sensitive skin and I get razor bumps, and it's just not an enjoyable process. Mm-hmm. But now that we have Athena Club in our corner, I just do not mind the chore of shaving. It doesn't feel like a chore anymore, to be perfectly honest. And I know that you've heard us talk about Athena Club by now, but this is your visual sign to finally try it, because Athena Club's award-winning TikTok viral razor kit is worth the hype, and you need to try it to believe it.
You truly do. I shaved my legs with my Athena Club razor in coral pink yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
I feel like a slick dolphin.
Oh!
I feel...
a pink river dolphin.
Kind of, but like a more, like a less gross the pink dolphins.
Yeah.
Let's not even go there. This razor. So first of all, the Athena Club's razors glide effortlessly. I ran out of shaving cream. This is a true story. I ran out of shaving cream after one leg. So I had to do my other leg completely dry. Not like
Raw
dry, but like not with any shaving cream. I could not tell the difference between the leg I used the cream on and the leg I did not.
I love that.
I didn't cut myself at all, which is unheard of without shaving cream and with basically a brand new razor.
Yeah.
So they have the super moisturizing water-activated serum with hyaluronic acid. Plus, it has these built-in skin guards that help prevent razor burn and reduce irritation. I went over my knees without shaving cream, and I didn't bleed.
No.
That is God's honest truth. That is my testimonial.
Yeah.
You will feel so soft after just one swipe.
Yeah, it's got those 5 precision engineered blades. Like, you're not going over the same patch 50 times.
Exactly. It took me seconds. And I would be remiss not to mention how inexpensive this is. The Athena Club Razor Kit is a steal at $10.
Yeah.
I've spent $10 on like literal garbage in the last week.
Yes.
But don't let that price fool you. This razor feels expensive. It comes with an ergonomic handle that is beautiful. They come in gorgeous colors and 2 super sharp razor heads that deliver an incredibly smooth shave every time. Probably my favorite thing about it is this magnetic hook.
Yup.
I don't know why, like,
it's a godsend.
Whatever razors I was using, whatever garbage I was using before did not have a magnetic hook.
Yeah.
This does. It's game-changing for easy storage. This means you don't have to worry about your razor somehow, like, clattering to the floor and ending up in multiple pieces.
Getting all goopy.
The blades don't get goopy. It's also not just sitting there, like, in the, like, cold water on the edge of your tub, just, like, daring you to knock it over.
Right.
So if you still think that all razors are created equal and have not made the switch yet, you need to try Athena Club's Razor Kit. It is the best deal you'll get on a premium razor, and it'll keep you feeling confident in your own skin all year long.
So if you're ready to upgrade your shaving experience, switch to the best razor on the market and show your skin you care with Athena Club. Head over to athenaclub.com to try their award-winning razor and body products and get 20% off your purchase with code GALS at checkout. You can also find Athena Club razors at your local Target store. Trust me, you won't look back. Happy shaving!
You know when you let, like, emails in your inbox pile up and it's like, you know, subscribe to this and good deal on that and blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
yes.
Did I already sign up for that? I don't know. Do I want to unsign up for that? I don't know. I just, like, need someone or something to just think for me.
Yep. Tell me what I'm paying for and tell me how to get rid of it. Well, better yet, get rid of it for me.
Yeah, that is exactly what Rocket Money does. So if you have an increase in a subscription price, it tells you.
Yeah.
And if you're like, no, screw that. I don't want this, like, you know, doubled up extra value packed app that I have not thought about in 6 months.
Be gone from me.
They'll cancel it for you.
Yeah.
It's incredible. You got to try Rocket Money.
Rocket Money is the best. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Hi, it's like a little butler in your pocket that manages your money. With Rocket Money, I have full control over my subscriptions and a clear view of my expenses. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place. And if I see something I don't want or something that, like you said, suddenly got more expensive and they're like, are you sure you want to keep paying this? I can be like, no. And Rocket Money can help me cancel it with a few taps. I love how the dashboard shows me this month's spending compared to last month. I love to not only clearly see my spending habits, but I also love to see, like, Rocket Money's app in action, where it's like, oh, last month I said, nope, I don't want any of these anymore. And look how much more is in my account already this month.
It's
because
so
they canceled
satisfying.
it for me. Yes. The instant gratification, it's what every ADHD girly needs. They also can help me create a custom budget and keep my spending on track. And Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is submit a picture of your bill, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. They will deal with customer service for you. I'm telling you, it's the butler. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features.
That is so wild.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's so much money.
Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/gals. That's rocketmoney.com/gals. One more time, rocketmoney.com/gals.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, then, Lucy, what is our background, probably not psych, and hopefully a little case for Farm crisis crimes.
I actually do have a little bit of psych.
Ooh. Oh my
And
God.
I also want everyone to know that this episode is not going to be as boring as it sounds.
No, it's not.
Also, how we came up with this, I was talking to my lawyer, Corey's lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember how it came up.
The family lawyer.
The family lawyer. The topic of the farm crisis came. So
It did.
So like on it, like white straight dudes are constantly like, you should have me on your podcast. I have a really good idea for blah 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 blah. I'm like, just shut up. Just stop.
Yep.
You are not qualified. You are not an expert in anything related to this. You're not gonna be on the show. Anyway, he was like, you should do an episode on farm crimes. And I was like, okay, dude.
Okay, guy.
Okay, guy. And he's like, no, seriously. There were like murders, suicides, fraud, forgery, all this stuff, all this juicy stuff. Because he said that his law firm partner was like a lawyer during all of this. And he has like some fucking crazy stories.
Well, maybe he'll be familiar with my case today.
He'll probably be familiar with my case.
All
'cause
right.
It happened not too far away. So let's just get into it.
Let's get into it.
To clarify, there have been two major farm crises in U.S. history. So the first occurred in like the 20s and 30s, Great Depression, Dust Bowl time. That's not the one we're talking about today. But we should do Dust Bowl crimes because that would be so cool. That time is like so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'm in.
The second,
If only I could interview Helen about her childhood in the Dust Bowl.
we could interview my grandma.
You could.
She was a lot. She was the head of the household with her like 7,000 siblings.
Yikes.
One of whom listens to this show. Hi, Diane.
Oh.
Okay, so we're talking about the farm crisis in the 80s. According to Iowa PBS, which quite frankly is the best source out there for talking about
Especially
the farm
for
crisis.
this, specific topic.
I was very pleased with this particular source.
Yeah.
The farm crisis of the 1980s altered the fabric of rural America. During the 80s, American farmers faced an economic crisis that was more severe than any since the Great Depression. According to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the agricultural market severely deteriorated, which had attendant effects on agricultural banks. And a lot of what happened in the 80s was due to a significantly increased demand for farm commodities in the early 1970s.
Okay.
So they experienced this huge boom in the early 70s.
What would qualify as a farm commodity?
Like food.
Oh.
So basically, there were droughts happening all over the world.
Okay.
The dollar was worth a lot more. So we were able to export a lot of food and charge and get a lot of money for it.
Okay.
So they had this boom in the early 70s.
Got it.
And during this time, and I'm using Iowa as an example for a lot of this, Iowa's total population was over 2 million, with 42% of the population living on farms or in small towns.
Damn. That's a lot.
Like most people lived in rural communities.
Yeah, almost half.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. There's just a lot of rural shit in Iowa.
Jurors.
This increase in demand caused farm prices to grow at a much faster rate than their expenses. So farm incomes began to also rise rapidly. This is what we call a bubble. This combination of high farm income and high inflation caused the value of farmland to rise, while at the same time, the ready availability of credit caused farm debt also to rise sharply. So, I mean, I'll kind of explain this a little bit more, but the land itself was getting more expensive, but interest rates on that land was like bizarrely like negative. Like the real interest rate was negative. So people were encouraged to just expand.
Yeah.
And because at this time, the more crops they produced, the more money, like exponentially they made because
Right.
of this high demand around the world for farm food.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how they just blew up this bubble bigger and bigger and bigger because everyone was kind of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. But then as like everything else got more expensive, then their only assets were their land, and that's like the first thing to go.
Yeah.
When they get into debt, and they're like approved for all these loans at first, and then people like defaulted on them. It kind of reminds me of like the 2008 housing crash.
It's just that's just how bubbles work. That's the nature
Yeah.
of bubbles. Plus, at this time, you have technological advances. So machines are doing more work than actual people. So these farms are also getting industrialized. And over time, this sort of, we're seeing the beginning of this happening. But as these farms are being foreclosed on, because spoiler alert, a lot of them are foreclosed on.
A lot of them were, yeah.
Many of them were bought up by corporations or entities that would like rent them to other farmers.
Yep.
So it was just like the beginning of a huge fucking mess.
Mm-hmm.
So high farm income, high inflation, the value of the land itself is rising in the early 70s. This all stopped in the late 70s when the interest rates started to rise after the Federal Reserve Board tightened monetary policy to fight inflation. Because again, at this time, the inflation was going nuts too.
Mm-hmm.
So the Fed stepped in and was like, okay, we're
gotta slow
tightening
this
this up.
roll.
We're slowing the inflation. And changing conditions in worldwide supply and demand caused export demand for farm commodities to then decrease. So like the droughts stopped. Like other countries were able to start to keep up. So
And
like
it's cheaper for them to keep it local, so they're not going to buy and pay all the taxes to have it sent to them anymore if they can avoid it.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a very simple view of it. I mean, I'm not a fucking macro economist, but essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So the export decrease was partly due to the 1980 U.S. grain embargo against the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan.
Yeah,
and
we
Jimmy
put like
Carter was
sanctions
like,
on shit.
No. So then there was a grain embargo against Soviet Union. So we're not sending our grain to the Soviet Union either as a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a lot of jargon that I can barely follow. So just to give you some perspective on the effects of all of what I just said, real farm income nationwide went from $92.1 billion in 1973 down to $22.8 billion in 1980.
Big drop, real fast.
Then to $8.2 billion in 1983.
Yeah.
So math,
Huge drop.
I did break out my calculator. That is an $89.3 billion loss in a decade, in 10 years.
That's an unfathomable amount of money.
Especially given
So
that we
fast.
started at only 92.
Yeah.
We lost 89. Like, that's the whole fucking industry.
Yeah. Bye.
So again, this is due to a perfect storm of economic, political, and technological factors. According to Farm Progress, farm foreclosures rose dramatically, and economists said more than 33% of farmers were in serious trouble, further depressing land prices. The farmers who had expanded by buying land during these strong export days of the 1970s, which again, they were highly encouraged to do.
Right.
Because again, the prices were high, but the real interest rates were in the negative. So everyone was saying like, expand now, invest in this, and then you can just fucking sit on it and watch the money roll in.
I was going to say, I'm willing to bet there were like government incentives for certain crops too that we were exporting. And so farmers were investing in growing the things that were in the highest demand. And then that demand disappears. And all the prices are fucking wild and out of control. And then they're hemorrhaging money on a national scale.
And a lot of these
fucking
farmers
disaster.
went into huge debt in order to expand.
Yep.
And then when there's no
It
payoff
doesn't pay
in
off,
sight, then it's just high interest. Yeah. Okay, so those who had expanded were hit the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
The events in the farm economy were reflected in farm bank failures in 1981 and 1985. So in 81, only one agricultural bank was among the nation's 10 bank failures. So 10 total banks went, one was a farm bank.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1985, 62 agricultural banks failed, accounting for over half of the nation's bank failures that year. That was only 4 years later.
Yeah.
So it's just getting worse.
And also, a lot of these banks that went under, like in my case, somebody was able to buy one of these banks. They're like these farm communities will have maybe 200 fucking people in them. This is the tiny bank for that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's just like something like that going under obviously affects the farmers, but it also affects like the whole community built around that industry. Yeah. That's
entire towns just left.
Yeah. Because there's nothing.
Mm-hmm. There's
nothing. Nowhere to even keep your money.
I have a stat in here somewhere that, it's estimated that one rural business closed for every 4 farms that went under.
That's wild.
That's a lot. Okay, so here's a quote. I found an article from 1986 with some really devastating quotes in it, including this one. Quote, people may wonder why I made the decision to expand, but this is one farmer telling his side of the story. But I just had a son, and given the information that I was given, it seemed the right thing to do.
Yep.
The land grant colleges were telling us we'd have $10,000 land by the 90s, so use your leverage. What a joke. Now my boy tells me he wouldn't be caught dead farming. He doesn't want to end up a loser like his dad.
Oh, God. I mean, it's so fucked up when, I feel like this happened with the housing crisis. It was like, oh, yeah, these banks are wanting to give out these loans because, like, they were easy to get. And then the banks make all this money off of the interest. And then the bubble fucking bursts, and we had so many fucking foreclosures nationwide. It's the same shit with these farms.
I feel like it's ultra devastating, too, because like the housing crisis and this farm crisis, it sort of preys on, or at least it's predicated on, like, the American dream, like owning a home and
the middle class, the lower end middle class. It's like, oh, you can finally afford to expand your legacy, your farm. You can finally afford to get a home. And on these farms, they also fucking live there. It's not like you just lost your job. It's like you lost your home. It devastated your community, your livelihood, also, your legacy for your family.
In a lot of cases, like your heritage. A lot of these people had their, ancestor, just a couple generations come over from wherever.
And the asset that you invested in, I mean, millennials have been fed these lines about fucking buying houses because it's like, it, creates generational wealth and it's an asset that's like secure and in your name. And like on paper, that all sounds really great. But then when there is a huge crisis and you need to sell, like, none of these farmers could fucking sell their land because there was a huge farm crisis and nobody was buying farmland. It was all fucking foreclosed on.
Yeah. I mean, well, banks were buying it.
Well, right. Exactly. But like farmers aren't buying it.
Yeah. It's just a loss.
Banks are buying it and selling it for scrap. Yeah. And getting to like write off the loss because it's a business expense.
And the concept of like manifest destiny too, which I always want to call event horizon. When I try to remember the term manifest destiny.
Honestly,
for some reason, event horizon crops up first.
Same diff.
It's kind of the same thing. Yeah, it's just this whole devastating loss of like the American dream, especially when like rugged, independent self-reliance is like the
Western
name of the
ideal.
Game. Yeah. Anyway, so that was a sad quote. And here's my psych. I can't believe I found psych for this.
I'm pumped.
This is from the same article. Melissa Farley, an Iowa City psychotherapist who counsels rural families under stress, very specific, sees a predictable cycle in Johnson County farmers. Johnson County, by the way, is the county where like Iowa City is. So it's like southeast Iowa.
Okay.
Denial gives way to anger, then to depression and self-doubt. She says, quote, when I talk to farm women, They all say they understand how the person in my case felt, and my case is very devastating. So there's a progressive sense of being pushed up against the wall. They've been independent all their lives. Then they lose control of everything. The bank controls every bit of cash that comes through their hands. There's a terrible lack of dignity. People are scared. They last out. There are more temper outbursts, more substance abuse, and more domestic violence. A lot of women getting hit these days.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, toxic masculinity plays a role in all of this. And yeah. And just mental health in general, like men, especially boomer men and greatest generation men in the 1970s and 80s, they're not necessarily going and asking their neighbors for help because there's shame.
Right.
And that changed it paved the way for a lot of these issues, especially when we get into like specific incidents. But also it like fundamentally changed these communities because it was made to feel like you can't rely on your neighbors, and people just sort of got like cold and distant, drifted apart. And again, a lot of these small towns, the banks failed, the towns themselves just became empty. It's devastating. And you drive through rural Iowa today and like, you know, these really cute, quaint small towns, some of them are like, you know, fairly robust, and some of them are like,
falling
Jesus
apart.
Christ, there's nobody here.
Yeah, there's like a gas station, a bar, and a bank.
And then a main street where every single business is shuttered.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
It's sad.
So the farm crisis decimated small towns where many businesses closed. This then spread to the cities where manufacturers of farm implements and other agricultural supplies, like, so John Deere is a good example, laid off thousands of people. The quads,
and I'm sure they were in like a manufacturing boom during all of this rapid expansion of the farming and the global food
technological advances. Yep.
So like this didn't just affect the farmers, it affected so many different industries that contributed to the expansion of farming, and even like the shipping.
Corey's grandpa retired from John Deere, and his pension was like fucking awesome, but it was pretty much just because he dodged all of this in the 80s.
Yeah, that's lucky.
Yeah. The Quad Cities in Iowa, so that's Bettendorf, Davenport, Moline, East Moline, and Rock Island. I think Rock Island is in Illinois. I don't know why there are 5 cities listed for the Quad Cities, but whatever. The Quad Cities lost an estimated 20,000 manufacturing jobs during this crisis. Waterloo, Iowa, ever heard of it?
Yep.
Lost 14% of its population in the early 80s, and many homes were left abandoned. I called my mom earlier to ask her if she like remembered this, because she grew up in Cedar Falls, which is right next to Waterloo, and their family business was based in Waterloo. And she said she didn't really remember like specifics other than it was just like a really dark cloud over everything. And that her mom, who at that point ran the business, was like really freaked out about it. But it was also a beer distribution business. So like their industry was fine.
Listen, my dad always used to teach me that. He worked for many years in wine and spirit marketing. And he was like, if you work in the alcohol business, people are drinking when they're sad and people are drinking when they're happy. So it's a pretty stable place to be.
Yep.
I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'll be a bartender server.
Came in handy on Sunday.
Yeah. And be on a podcast called Wine and Crime.
Yeah. Stick on the side of alcohol. You'll be fine.
Keep alcohol close.
It's always trendy.
Thanks, Dad. Great advice.
At least he didn't die of liver failure.
No.
Then we might have reconsidered his advice.
For someone with a lot of access to actually very, very bad and very good booze, we ran the gamut. We had a lot in that basement. My parents have never really been a lot of that basement. Neither of them were ever really big drinkers.
Yeah, that's why they never noticed when their Smirnoff went missing.
Precisely. My mom didn't.
It was great for us.
My mom didn't even question it until she like needed a bottle of vodka for cooking, like making vodka sauce. And I was like, oh no, we're out. Grandma must have drank the last bit of it for her Cosmos.
A case of Smirnoff?
Listen, they weren't keeping an inventory.
No, that was apparent.
Bye.
Hi, Suzanne. Okay. For many, the stresses of the farm crisis became too much. Too much for some of them.
Yeah.
There was an increase in rural murders and suicides due to these hardships. This also impacted the feeling of camaraderie long prevalent in rural communities, like I was saying, so much so that some struggling people reported feeling shunned by their friends and neighbors.
And I mean, at least in my case, so I have to imagine this happened in other places too. When people are murdering their neighbors, essentially, because they live in these small communities, and even if that neighbor happens to be like the person who signed off on your loan that you now defaulted on, that's still, I mean, that's terrifying. And so many of these neighbors, like these communities, didn't feel safe.
It's so disorienting.
Yeah.
And I think it just added to this crazy nightmare that like you were saying earlier, the American dream of buying a house or having a farm and being so self-efficient and autonomous. And then everything all of a sudden just gets turned completely on its head.
It falls
and
apart.
You
it's
don't,
terrifying.
and you've never even imagined being in this position because you feel like you have so many fail-safes in place.
And you have kids
and it turns
a family
out
and
you
employees and
the security is gone.
Gone. And you've devoted your life. A lot of farmers are like legacy farmers.
Yep.
And don't have other transferable skills. Like, this is what they know how to fucking do. Many of them were like schooled through maybe high school education, did not go to college, immediately took on duties on the family farm, and then took over the farm.
I mean, most people in rural communities in the mid 20th century didn't.
No.
They went that route anyway.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was. Yeah.
And so as the times changed, and they changed so fast, it's like, how do you even fucking have time? And how are you supposed to afford to then like get an education and learn a completely new way of life to sustain yourself? That's wild. That
and
would be
also
horrifying.
your neighbors are killing each other.
Yes, and themselves.
Yeah.
That's a lot of devastation to handle in the span of a decade.
Yep. So alcohol abuse and domestic violence in rural communities, those rates went way up. A farm wife from southern Iowa wrote in her journal on December 6th, 1984, quote, "I feel 100 years old, 14 years of farming, and we never made a dime.
Oh, God. And it's such hard work.
I'm 44 years old, and I'm back to zero." So basically, she's saying after 14 years of farming, they lost everything they ever gained.
Yep.
They lost
Which was
everything.
very little in the first place.
Yeah. I mean,
And the only asset
maybe.
they had, their farm, is now worthless.
Mm-hmm.
They're bankrupt.
She said, "I'm ready to sell out. I hate to lose my home place, but I can accept defeat when I have to. I could mourn forever all the lost dreams. I don't sleep well, and the rage in me is about to explode. I just can't go on. I have to hide my feelings from the kids and from the folks."
Oh, God. It's so isolating. Don't
Right.
hide your feelings.
Oh, God.
It only harms you. You're not a burden for talking about what you're going through.
Yeah. It only harms you until you lash out and murder 3 people.
Well, exactly. Yes, it only harms you until it potentially harms other people. But yeah.
Regular people and artists seem to give more shits about this crisis than Congress at the time.
Yeah. Who knew that was always and will always be the case?
Well, who swoops in but Willie Nelson? In 1985, he and others founded Farm Aid. So it was a huge concert held in Champaign, Illinois on September 22nd, 1985.
Champagne.
54 acts performed before a crowd of more than 75,000 people and raised more than $7 million for farm families.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, but like...
it's a very small dent in, what was it? An $84 billion like deficit. 89. Sorry, I was low.
2.
God, 90 million, billion. God.
But God.
God.
Please.
Please.
A 1987 New York Times article reported that, quote, "In Iowa, state health figures show that about 47 farmers have killed themselves every year since 1980.
47 a year in the span of 7 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Food
That's
pantries.
a lot of people.
Yeah. Food pantries sprang up in rural communities to offer hunger relief. People were literally starving. Government cheese giveaways.
Fucking government cheese! Here we go.
Provided important protein, as did livestock donation programs. They were just trying to feed their neighbors.
Yeah.
Literally, here's some cheese. Maybe you can get food tomorrow. Iowa State University Extension offered counseling by telephone on its Rural Concern Hotline.
Oh, dear.
Between October 1st, 1984 and December 31st, 1985, the hotline communicated with almost 12,000 people.
Oh, man. In a year.
Yeah, a little over a year. The university also held meetings and support groups across the state that interacted with more than 50,000 Iowans.
And remember,
this is just in Iowa.
I was just gonna fucking say that. It's like, these are only the figures in Iowa.
Yeah.
A lot of that just like belt that goes right across through the middle of the country is predominantly farming community. And this was happening in all of them.
Yeah. And I'm not even trying to suggest that Iowa had it the worst. I don't actually know which had it the quote unquote worst.
But I mean, Iowa's farming industry is like one of the main industries of the state. So it makes sense that this is like a good barometer for how awful this was and the impact that it had.
Yeah. So Congress, bless them, didn't get involved until the second half of the 80s, and many felt that was too late, because it was. However, the federal government's response brought about some of the most profound policy reforms the agricultural sector had ever seen. So we have three key pieces of legislation from the 80s that are still having an effect today. So these are the three. We've got the 1985 Farm Bill. This established a comprehensive framework within which the Secretary of Agriculture will administer agriculture and food programs from 1986 through 1990. This allowed for lower commodity price income support and created several conservation programs. So it basically means if you're making less now for your crop of soybeans, we can help you financially make up a portion of that loss.
For 4 years.
Only between 86 and 90, yes. The second one is called Chapter 12 bankruptcy. So this allows farmer debtors with regular annual income to achieve debt relief. Chapter 12 bankruptcy relieves debtors who qualify as family farmers and fishermen. But because it targets a very narrow class of debtors, it was overall really underutilized. However, for those who did qualify, it allowed them to restructure their finances and avoid liquidation or foreclosure. So it was a really sweet deal if you qualify. But it's kind of like the public service loan forgiveness program. Like, you may or may not qualify, but like it kind of feels like you have to like successfully answer these riddles 3 before you can get it.
Yeah.
And then we have the Agricultural Credit Act. According to the Farm Credit Administration, this act authorized up to $4 billion in federal assistance to troubled institutions of the farm credit system, including up to $2.8 billion in Treasury guaranteed 15-year bonds. This also created the Federal Agricultural Mortgage Corporation, which established a secondary market for agricultural real estate and rural home mortgages. I don't fully understand this, but basically what I think it did was create a second, like a subset of mortgages for these rural communities so that they had their own like ways to qualify for their own set of rules.
Okay.
I think that's kind of what that means.
I mean, that makes sense.
It does make sense. And by the 90s, when this crisis was quote unquote over, although the effects are
still very much present today. Yeah.
About 1 in every 4 farms ceased to function.
Damn.
And if you consider how many fucking farms there were before all this, that's a lot.
Well, I have to imagine that during this crisis, a lot of that foreclosed on land that was then sold by banks was not necessarily sold to be farmed again. And so it's very possible that a lot of that farmland could have been lost entirely in the sale.
I don't think a lot of it was because it's really rich soil. Like this, the land had been used as farmland, so that just kind of makes it more fertile just by nature.
Sure.
But what it did mean is that they sold it to either wealthy people who had like big conglomerates of farmland already. Like
right,
there's
and
a lot of farmland in at least Iowa is owned by like a couple of different entities.
oh yeah, and then they rent it to farmers at often like really astronomical prices, and they make a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, or they just run it like under corporate, different foreign entities too. Like there's a bunch of like Chinese-owned farmland, for
Sure.
example. It's just got... The point is, the family farm is not at levels that it used to be.
No,
it's still
like,
pretty... The family farms are still pretty... They're still around, for sure. But... Yeah,
not like it was.
The before and after is jarring. So... But to tell you what constitutes a farm in the first place, the USDA defines a farm as any place that produced and sold, or normally would have produced and sold, at least $1,000 worth of agricultural products during a given year.
Okay, so
It's not the
it's a
garden
pretty
in your
broad-
backyard.
Yeah, but that's still a pretty broad scope in terms of size of farms, because $1,000 of product in a year is not very much. So this covers farms that could be very small to extremely large.
Yeah, so this also shows you, too, how small farms can be, which kind of gives you an idea of how many farms there are.
Sure.
The USDA uses acres of crops and head of livestock to determine if a place with sales less than $1,000 could normally produce and sell at least that amount to qualify it as a farm. Of the 1.9 million farms that currently dot America's rural landscape, only 955 are operated by families, individuals, family partnerships, or family corporations.
What? That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that figure was before the crisis?
No.
That would be interesting. But yeah, that's devastating.
Mm-hmm. Farmers and ranchers receive only 15 cents on average out of every retail dollar spent on food. So the rest goes to wages and materials for production, processing, marketing, transportation, and distribution. 30% of all farmers are quote unquote beginner farmers, which means they've been in business for less than 10 years. And the average age is 47.
Wow.
So they're older, but there is like kind of a push for younger farmers, at least in my area.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool. In 2023, $174.9 billion worth of American agricultural products were exported around the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's some background on the farm crisis.
Damn.
And I have a short case for us.
I love it.
This is the story of Dale Burr.
Ooh, okay.
Dale Bernhardt. Not really. Dale Burr. Dale Burr was born in 1922 and was a third-generation corn and bean farmer.
He's a corn bean man.
I could live off corn and beans for the rest of my life.
Literally same.
I believe he was born in Lone Tree, Iowa, which is near Iowa City. It's in Johnson County, which I mentioned before.
Cute.
And because I know you were curious, it would take me 46 hours to walk there from my house.
And now if you wanted to walk there.
As a teenager, Dale was once voted the healthiest boy in Johnson County.
Wow.
It's a weird flex, but I'll take it.
Yep. An award's an award.
He was a man who walked tall in Johnson County because he had a homestead that stood on some of the most fertile land in the state.
Oh, wow.
Also because he was 6'2".
Oh, tall. Tall man.
He's a tall man. He's a tall bean and corn man.
I've got a tall man in my case, too.
Dale's brother-in-law, so it's his sister's husband, his brother-in-law, a guy named Keith Forbes, said about Burr, quote, "He was a good farmer, a wealthy man, and a welcome customer in any store in this county." Which I took to mean it was Keith's impression, at least Keith's, that Dale was he had money, He was,
Okay.
I mean, he said he was a wealthy man. He'd be welcome in any store. It wasn't apparent that he was
In debt, in serious debt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
However, a lot changed during the farm crisis of the 1980s. Burr, who was 63 years old in 1985, found himself more than $500,000 in debt on the 560 acres in Lone Tree where he had his farm. According to the Chicago Tribune on November 30th, 1985, Burr and his wife Emily confided in Keith Forbes and Burr's sister, Forbes' wife. Her name was Ruth. So Keith and Ruth, Dale and Emily. So Dale and Emily come over to the Forbes' house and they just spill about all of their problems.
We're fucked.
According to Forbes, Dale, quote, Dale wasn't one for talk, but for 5 hours they poured out their hearts.
Oof.
I remember Emily saying, I'm 64 years old, and for the first time in my life, I don't have money for groceries. Forbes said that while Burr never revealed the sum of their debt or why they had fallen so behind, he estimates that his brother-in-law may have owed as much as $1 million to all of his creditors, including $10,000 to Forbes himself.
Oh, dear.
So he had
Debt in
loaned
the
his
family.
brother-in-law 10 grand.
That he's never going to get back.
Spoiler, he doesn't get it back.
No.
Burr had taken out one $39,000 bank loan to help pay off farming debts incurred by his son, John, who was aged 39. John raised hogs and apparently made a questionable investment in some really expensive acreage and then kind of found that he was fucked. Asked his dad for money. His dad took out a $39,000 loan to help his son.
Oof.
But then that's now Dale's dead.
Yeah, it just keeps, the buck keeps passing right back.
Forbes said, quote, it hurt Dale not to be able to pay his debts. He said that the Hills Bank was after him to sell his livestock and machinery and rent his land out, but he was too proud for that. So the stress of it all got to Burr. On December 9th, 1985, Burr went down to the basement of his family homestead for his Remington 12-gauge pump shotgun.
Ooh.
There's some question as to whether the next thing happened before or after the main thing.
Okay.
For this rendition, we're going to go with before.
Okay.
He then went up to the kitchen where his wife Emily was baking cookies
Oh, God.
and killed her with a single blast to the chest. Friends said he evidently could not bear having to live with what he couldn't bear her having to live with what he was about to do. However, some reports, again, state that Emily's murder happened after the following. He then climbed into his old rickety, rusty pickup truck and drove to the Hills Bank and Trust Company in the neighboring town of Hills. It's about 6 miles away. Once he got to Hills Bank, he tried to cash a $500 check. I think he wrote himself a check and tried to cash it, but the teller refused because his account was overdrawn, or the account was overdrawn. Bill then went back to his truck, grabbed the loaded shotgun. He put it down his overalls as he went back into the bank and just went right over, pushed open the door to the office of the bank president, a 46-year-old man named John Hughes. Burr fired a single blast and hit Hughes in the head, killing him instantly. It was later reported that the irony of Hughes's murder was that he was widely considered to be a friend to the local farmers. So there's a guy named Ray Marner Jr. from a different bank recalled, quote, he realized how hard it is to turn down someone for a loan during the week when you have to sit next to them in church on Sunday.
Yeah, these communities are tiny. It's not banking the way that we know it.
It's incredibly personal.
It's personal. And it feels personal, even when it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
it's not
the other
that
half.
banker's
It
fault.
feels personal.
Yeah, it's not that banker's fault for not being able to approve your loan.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But
yeah, it's also reported that Hughes reportedly had no intention of foreclosing on Burr's farm. He was trying to help him, but Dale murdered him anyway. He then moved into an adjoining office where he aimed at 2 other bank officers, but I don't know a lot about guns. It said he double pumped the pump shotgun, which I assume was an accident, and apparently that ejected the round that might otherwise have taken their lives. So he like double pumped it, and the unspent cartridge like popped out.
Okay.
So the shotgun was no longer loaded.
Okay.
So they weren't killed. A person named B.D. Dua, a bank customer, said, quote, "I was in there doing business. I turned around and heard a shot. Everybody started running. I thought it was a robbery." After he left the bank, Burr hunted down his own neighbor, 38-year-old Richard Goody, on Goody's farm. Goody had won a $6,000 judgment from Burr's son in a land dispute, so Burr must have felt like he had a score to settle.
Yup.
Burr found Goody and shot him in the face and left his corpse in the snow between 2 hog feeders.
Oh, no.
And like a minute later, Goody's wife, Marilyn, returned home from running an errand with their 6-year-old son, Mark.
Oh, God.
And she saw Dale with his shotgun and her dead husband's body. And so she stepped on the gas and got the fuck out of there in the car.
Thank God.
And he tried shooting. He tried to shoot them and missed.
Thank God. Damn.
As Burr headed back to his farm, a Johnson County deputy sheriff drove up behind him with the sirens blaring. Burr pulled off the road as the officer waited in his patrol car for reinforcements.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to get shot.
They knew exactly what had happened.
This is crazy. Like, our cases are so similar.
I mean, I think a lot of people were driven to this shit. When the other deputies and state police arrived, they found Burr slumped in his truck, dead of 2 shotgun wounds to the chest.
Damn.
Dude shot himself in the chest with a shotgun twice.
That's wild.
Yeah. At his home, authorities found Emily's body along with a 1-sentence note written by Burr addressed to his son, John, that said, "I'm sorry, I can't take the problems anymore."
Well, if he took his gun and went and did this at the bank and then went, well, maybe he could have come back, killed his wife, and then gone after his neighbor. But it does, the timeline discrepancy, it does kind of make more sense that he like made this plan. He killed his wife before enacting his plan in the event that he would survive. I don't think he had any intention of living. I think he always intended to kill himself or be killed in the process.
Yeah, the only thing that makes me think that he went to the bank, then went back and killed Emily, then killed his neighbor, then got pulled over, is because if he went to the bank and he didn't end up shooting anybody, then he had just murdered his fucking wife for no reason.
I suppose, but if he was like really determined and he was preparing to leave with the firm belief that he would be successful, then
yeah, I don't know.
You know,
I think it's more likely he killed his wife first. But psychologically, it does make sense that he didn't kill her first because he wasn't maybe so like fucking out of his mind yet.
Sure. And
like
it's
if
oh
she
God,
was his first murder.
Sure.
Like it's possible he could have like snapped out of it and been like, oh fuck or something. Yeah, I don't know.
You'd hope.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Either way,
it sounds like he was very far gone at this point psychologically.
Yeah, either way, he did leave a note at some point or another, not in a great place. And we're never going to understand. So this was the saddest part. Well, not the saddest. This is the cherry on top. In Iowa City, 1,500 mourners went to Bank President Hughes's memorial service. In Lone Tree, Dale and Emily were buried side by side in a cemetery 1 mile from their farm. Goody's widow refused a military funeral for her husband, who had been a Vietnam War veteran, because she wanted, quote, no more guns.
Oh, I don't blame her.
Yeah. She's like, no more guns.
Yeah,
no more
I don't want
blasts.
a fucking 21 gun salute at the burial of my husband who died in a senseless
was shot in the face
gun violence incident.
Yeah.
Can't blame her for that.
Nope. So that is the story of Dale Burr and his several victims. And
wow.
little bit of insight into the psychology shit show that resulted from the farm crisis.
Yeah, I didn't know much about this, but fuck, it was bad. And this gives a lot more, this background gives a lot more clarity to my case.
Excellent. I can't wait to hear it.
Thank you for doing that.
You're so welcome.
You're amazing.
So are you.
You're a gentleman and a scholar. All right. Let's take another quick break to hear a word from our sponsors and then get back into the devastating consequences of, like, national debt.
BRB.
While I do live in consistent fear that, like, AI and robots are taking over the world, this is
coming out hot.
Yeah, this is one where I am ready. Like, cowboy, take me away, take over. I should not be doing this chore anyway. I'm just so happy to have my favorite robot in my house, my litter robot. I literally never have to change, like, scoop a litter box ever again with my trusty little robot.
The robots are here, and I'm cool
here
with
for it. Yeah.
Litter Robot is the solution to all your litter box problems. Never scoop again with Litter Robot. Amanda said it. I'm saying it. Literally, you never have to scoop again. Litter Robot's self-cleaning technology automatically cleans after every single poop or pee that your cats do. So your cats will always have a fresh bed of litter to do their business as they deserve.
Yep.
And your friends won't think that your house reeks like a litter box.
Nope.
And get this, Litter Robot will send you a notification to your phone when it needs to be emptied. It even gives you data and insights to stay on top of your cat's health. Listen.
Okay, this is my husband's favorite part.
It's my favorite part.
He got the app or whatever, and he gave the Litter Robot, you can name it. I don't think I can say the name in this PG ad, but
you can't.
Yeah, so that's really funny. So he gets these notifications that'll be like, Beans used the blank palace, and then it'll be like, this is what she did in there, and this is how much she weighs. The other day he was just like, oh, Beans weighs 6.5 pounds. And I was like, how do you know that? He's like, Litter Robot told me.
Dude, I have the same app for my human child.
Yeah.
When she's at daycare.
Yep.
It's like, she ate at this time. She had diarrhea at this time.
Yep.
And I get the same information, well, similar information, about my other babies, my cats.
Incredible. It's incredible.
It's so great.
Mm-hmm.
It just does not get any easier than this, and your cat or cats will thank you. So join over 1 million happy pets and pet parents who've upgraded to Litter Robot. What are you waiting for?
This is gonna change your whole life. Whisker is currently offering $50 off Litter Robot bundles as a special offer to listeners of the show. Go to stopscooping.com/gals and use promo code GALS to save an additional $50 on any Litter Robot bundle. That's $100 off any Litter Robot bundle at stopscooping.com/gals and use promo code GALS one more time. Stopscooping.com/gals, promo code GALS, and treat your litter.
Treat it. So we are proud to have a brand new sponsor on the show, and that sponsor is Lola V, which is an award-winning hair care line founded by Jennifer Aniston.
Who knew?
Who knew? And, like, Jennifer Aniston is known by her hair. The Rachel. So, of course, it makes sense that she puts out a beautiful line of hair care product. So we all put our hair through the ringer. We color it. We heat style it. Stress, aging, the list, split ends, a biannual trim. Yeah, the list goes on. Over time, it really takes a toll. And, you know, Jen really gets us. She got tired of the damage and the struggle of having to choose between hair products that work and ones that are actually good for us. So, like, instead of doing all the mathematics of, like, mixing this cream with that serum and blah, 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 she decided to bottle something of her own by diving into the science of it all while using naturally derived plant-based ingredients that smell amazing.
They smell so good.
I was using my new hair products in the bath the other day, and Corey walked past the bathroom, and he's like, "Oh my God, it smells so good in there." I was like,
babe,
yeah.
It smells like Jennifer Aniston in here.
Jennifer Aniston's in here with me.
Oh,
You're welcome. And here's a treat for you, our awesome listeners. For a limited time, you get an exclusive 15% off your entire order at lolav.com. Just use the promo code GALS at checkout. And like I said, who else are you going to trust with your hair other than the woman who gave us the Rachel?
seriously. All Lola V products are also incredible. We got like the whole line from them, and I have used every single product. I'm obsessed. They feature their signature scent, a naturally derived blend of herbal citrus and woody notes, and it's so subtle.
It's not like overly like traditionally feminine.
No,
you know what I mean? It just smells universally delicious.
I feel like a mythical fairy that just like spent an afternoon gallivanting in a forest, and now I have the natural scent of like the woods and the herbs I rolled in with my fairy friends just clinging to my hair follicles. It's magic. So just imagine that uplifting combination of fresh citrus, calming rose petals, crisp lemongrass, refreshing green tea, intoxicating woods, gentle musk. I mean, it's literally magic in a bottle. Inspired by Jennifer Aniston's favorite spas from around the world, the Lola V product line is more than just hair care. It's a passport to tranquility for your senses. I mean, if you want to bring the spa into your house, this is how you do it, babes. So unlock Jennifer Aniston approved hair at lolav.com. As our listeners, you'll get an exclusive 15% off your entire order when you use code GALS at checkout. That's 15% off your order at LOLAVIE.com with promo code GALS. And please note that you can only use one promo code per order and discounts can't be combined. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Your hair will thank you. And welcome to smelling like Jennifer Aniston.
Welcome. Do you love the Golden Girls?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Then we are so excited to tell you about the Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast, a hilarious new podcast recapping everyone's favorite sitcom, The Golden Girls.
Oh, I'm pumped about this. The Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast is more than just a recap show because each episode is packed with fun facts and little-known trivia about the show. And at the end of each episode, the hosts give you a fully researched deep dive into something fascinating from the Golden Girls universe. So this is like Golden Girls the way you maybe didn't even know her before. For example, remember Coco, the gay chef from the pilot episode? Where did he go? Whatever happened to that actor? The Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast will give you his whole story, including its unbelievable and truly mysterious ending.
Oh my God, I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
How about this one? Did you know that Bea Arthur was a truck driver in the Marines before becoming an actress?
I feel like Bea Arthur and your grandma are the same person.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were. Or how about that rumored on-set feud between Bea Arthur and Betty White? We've all heard about that.
I refuse to believe, but I need to know more.
I need to know. The Golden Girls Deep Dive team has done the research, and they're going to tell you all about it.
Hosted by true crime obsessed Patrick Hines and Broadway scene stealer Jennifer Simard, the Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast is about to be one of your favorite podcast obsessions. So grab your cheesecake and head to the lanai as you follow the Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast wherever you listen. Okay, so I've got a local one for you today. And
nice.
Not every small town in the Midwest is pure as the driven snow, don't you know?
No, few are.
Also, I feel like this story would make a great season of Fargo, so get at us, FX. Okay?
Because we own the rights to this story.
We do. We do. We do not. But it was my idea to say that this would be good. So I want my cut.
Okay. You'll get it, I'm sure.
I'm told that's how this works. Okay. So we're in the 80s for this story. Obviously. Let's meet our main characters. We've got Rudolph Blythe, or Rudy Blythe. Rudy was a formidable man, standing 6'4" and 250 pounds.
Ah, another Tallman.
Another Tallman. He'd grown up in Philadelphia as the son of a successful and affluent scientist. Rudy had moved his wife and young son to the small farming town of Ruthven, Minnesota. And I mean small, okay? It had a population of 467 in the mid-70s, early 80s. Now, post-farm crisis, has a population of about 227.
Oh, she's tiny.
This entire town has fewer people than were at my wedding.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So he moved his family from the Philly area to this little town in the late 70s where he purchased the local bank and looked forward to being his own boss, being able to contribute to the community in a way that only a small town banker could. He tried straight away to get involved in the community. He organized the local Lions Club and they worked on community projects. He got on the town council. He revived a proposal for a local home for old folks.
Cute.
He donated money to send the Ruffton Girl Scouts on a train trip to Duluth.
Oh, for cute.
Yeah, he worked hard, but despite their attempts to assimilate, the family encountered standoffish hostility from the small, tight-knit community of farmers. Big city guy coming in here and buying up the bank and trying to get his hands on everything in the town.
Send our girls away to Duluth.
Mm-hmm. Rudy tried to be folksy, learning names, family histories, dropping it at the cafe across the street for coffee. But his suit and tie and college education made locals feel uneasy in his presence. When Rudy ran for county commissioner, he was resoundingly defeated.
Oh, I feel kind of bad for him.
I do too, and you're allowed to.
Okay.
That being said, the locals did acknowledge that Rudy seemed to genuinely want to help people. They just didn't vibe with the guy. Okay?
Just something off about him.
There's something's off. Former town mayor Birch said that, quote, that Rudy, he'd help anybody. So he got him, Jim, who we'll get to, he got him going. Long story short, it wasn't going so good for Jim. He got behind on payments and he wasn't taking very good care of the cattle he had.
So Rudy helped him with a farm.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And as the bank owner of the bank, he's processing loans and, et cetera for the farmers.
Okay.
Quote, Rudy had tried to be helpful to some of these farmers, said Gary Lindahl, the cafe owner who served him coffee every day in the same booth next to the soft drink cooler. He sat there every day. But maybe he let people borrow when they shouldn't have, And now he was getting a little worried.
Uh-oh.
Which, like, a tale as old as time, never loan money to friends or family that you need to get back. But he owns a bank, so it's not like Rudy's giving necessarily his money. I do think in some situations he was doing that. Whether
you
that
can't
be
just give out bank money all willy-nilly.
Correct. I think whether that be direct, like, cash to, like, mutual aid or contributions he was making through all of these local programs that he had his hands in. But either way, he was making his own personal investments in the community as well. He was committed to doing that. He didn't have ulterior motives as far as I know. He just wanted that small town life with his family and he wanted to be helpful. Like, he was a good dude. Now we get to James Jenkins. James or Jim Jenkins. Jim was the only child of farmers.
Trust an alliterative name.
I know. James was the only child of farmers with a modest upbringing, so it's like a legacy farming family. He was short and stocky. He was a high school dropout. He was considered a quiet loner, ill at ease with people, more at home milking cows or repairing a tractor, which is like hardly unusual for the farmer type. God bless him. By the age of 46, Jim was overweight and suffering from complications from diabetes, specifically loss of vision. So he developed type 2 diabetes, and it was particularly harmful to his eyesight. He had retinitis pigmentosa, which we'll kind of get to later.
Pigmentosa. That's a beautiful word.
That's what I'm going to name my firstborn.
Pigmentosa.
Baby pigmentosa. These are my twins, retinitis and pigmentosa.
That's adorable. Ready and
like it.
Ready and Piggy.
Reddy and Piggy. He was extremely controlling and had an explosive temper. And it's not just his family who suffered for it, as he cut the tails off his dairy cows.
Why?
According to Mayor Birch, quote, Jim got mad because the cows would swat him with their tails when he was milking, Birch said. He milked by hand, so the cows only had short stub tails.
They're
foul. Swatting because there's flies.
There's flies. They have a tail for an evolutionary reason.
You took away the thing that covers their butthole and keeps the flies away from their poop chute.
God, that's
because you don't like being flicked in the face as a dairy farmer.
Surely there were other things. You could duct tape the tail to their side while you're milking.
I mean, I don't know, wear a helmet. I don't fucking know. Get a big hat.
Yeah. Sit on the other side.
Yeah.
What a jackhole.
He's a douche. It appears to be agreed that Jim worked hard, but he didn't earn a lot of sympathy from his fellow farmers because of his behavior. And despite everything going on with the farm crisis, the community also felt that he didn't make the best decisions, like financially and with his land. So the consensus was that Jim is a dick, and it sucks that he's struggling financially, but he made his bed, so it's not our problem.
Yeah, that's my consensus too.
Yeah. And I don't usually feel that way because I have, almost detrimental empathy, but I don't like this fucking guy.
No, the tails. That's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. He's giving all the worst things about boomer attitude.
Grumpy old man.
Yeah, in one package, one stocky package. So instead of self-reflection, he considered himself a perpetual victim. He always blamed everybody else for his issues. Mayor Birch pointed out that Jim Jenkins had not only fed his cows poorly, using primarily free sweet corn silage from Sleepy Eye, a city in Minnesota, don't you know? We also know he treated them fucking terribly because he cut off their goddamn tails, for God's sakes.
God.
Quote, he didn't have any land to raise crops or anything to feed those cows with, Birch said. He couldn't afford to buy corn and stuff like that. From the word go, it wasn't going to work. Other sources would seem to confirm that the 10 acres he owned was not suitable for the 50-plus cows he tried to keep. There was not enough pasture, meaning that the feed had to be purchased, which was expensive and, not as... He was getting the cheapest stuff he could, so it's not nutritionally sound for these cows. Soon, the livestock became malnourished, and liens were put on his equipment. Now, we've got Stephen Jenkins, who will later become Steven Anderson, which we'll get to as well. This is another key character in this case. It's Jim's son, Steve. Oh. According to Steve's mother, so Darlene Tavern is Jim's ex-wife. According to her, Steve desperately wanted his father's approval, but never got it. Quote, Jim tried to control everybody in his life, she said. He was a control freak, and if he couldn't control you like he couldn't control my life, then he just took it out on Steve. Steve just couldn't do anything right for him.
This guy is such a prick.
Mm-hmm. She said Steve, was brainwashed since he was little. Steve either did something the way his dad said or he'd suffer the consequences. And you do what you do to survive. I have my thoughts on Darlene, who I also understand. I don't know if she was also abused by Jim. It's very likely that she was. I don't want to believe that she chose to stand by and stay there while her child was being harmed in this way. I believe victims...
She was being abused.
Yeah, I believe victims of abuse. And I also didn't read anything about her being abused. And I don't like Steve. I don't love Darlene, who does not seem very committed to the safety and well-being of her son. And there are other things that happen down the road that lead me to believe this. But I also do feel for her because this had to have been a nightmarish household to live in.
Yeah, and probably in a rural farming community.
Right. Where do you go?
Time. I mean,
with
maybe
no resources, they're broke.
And maybe just the reporting or however you're getting the vibe that she may or may not have been abused, may or may not have been trying to protect her son. I don't know.
We'll get to why I kind of feel like this,
I think we can agree that it was a terrible situation.
It was a bad situation,
and that this guy's an asshole.
And Steve suffered, I'd say, the most, and it gets bad. So after the divorce of his parents, Steve had a rather unstable upbringing, constantly moving, because he wasn't staying with his mom. So I think Darlene divorced Jim, but did not take Steve out of the house with her, even though she clearly was aware.
Oh, she left him there.
Yeah, is harming him.
Great. That's great.
By the age of 18, Steve fancied himself a junior commando, sporting a military-style haircut and always wearing a military camouflage uniform. He had a tattoo on his right arm, and residents recall that he liked to wear a long knife strapped to his lower leg.
That's a look.
It was never specifically stated, but it's pretty logical to see that part of the fascination with the military was because Stephen was so desperate for the approval of like a paternal figure and some structure.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't getting it from his dad. So he was trying to get it from someone named Charles Snow, who was a former top sergeant who taught Stephen how to shoot and appeared to set himself up as some sort of mentor for Stephen. And they met Charles Snow because Jim at one point moved to like different states trying to establish himself. At one point they were in Texas, and Steve connected with this guy, Charles. Charles kind of took him under his wing. He's former military. Steve is really interested in joining the army, like, et cetera, et cetera. So he like starts to get into guns, and he's being taught to shoot by this guy.
Do Jim and Charles know each other, or is it just Steve and Charles?
They know each other.
Oh, okay.
It's just like a neighbor in Texas.
Okay.
So backing up a little bit before they went to Texas. So Steve's parents, Jim and Darlene, had owned the farm and had run a small dairy operation from 1977 to 1980. In 1979, they had pledged the property as security for a farm operating loan from Buffalo Ridge State Bank, which was the bank that had been recently purchased by Rudy Blythe. They secured a $40,000 loan. James and Darlene then divorced in 1980 when Darlene had grown unhappy with Jim's temper and the like hand-to-mouth existence she'd been living after 20 years of farming. So she left in August of 1980. She filed for divorce, alleging verbal abuse, and would later remarry. Jim would complain to others that his wife may have been stepping out with another man, possibly even Rudy Blythe.
Oh, come on.
While it was suggested in the research that Darlene did leave James for another man, nothing suggested that it was Rudy. And I think the fact that James would even mention it as a possibility kind of highlights his mental state and how he felt toward the owner of the bank, who is like an outsider of this community.
And he was just a guy that Jim didn't like. Blame. So he's like, my wife's sleeping with him. He's fucking with my money.
Yeah. So he would blame Rudy for basically everything that was going wrong in his life. James then defaulted on the $40,000 loan that he had.
Cut my cow's tails off.
Fucking Rudy stuck in and cut off my cow tails. Jim defaulted on the $40,000 loan that he had with Buffalo Ridge State Bank. Facing the loss of his farm and its assets that he'd put up as collateral, Jim started to illegally sell his cattle and tore out the plumbing from the house, apparently saying if he couldn't have the farm, no one could.
Okay.
He declared bankruptcy, still owing $25,000 on the loan. The family would abandon the property, so him and Steve, and the title for the property passed to the bank. Steve would alternatively live with his mother / paternal grandparents in Minnesota for a little while, and eventually dropped out of 11th grade to stay with his father and move around from Minnesota, Ohio, Texas, back to Minnesota.
Do you think that his mom tried to take him with her and he was like, no, I want to stay with my dad, who's like weirdly psychologically and physically abusive, but I'm yearning for his approval?
I really don't know, but I think that that's a very real possibility.
Okay.
And I don't know. I think to Darlene's credit, I think her son was very manipulated by his father. And I think she was seeing behavior in him that's very clearly learned from Jim, the man that she was trying to get away from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that also contributed to her decision
to just go.
To just kind of go and let Steve make his choice to go be with Jim.
That makes sense.
And, you know, again, I don't fault her for that. And I also have like feelings about it. Both things can be true.
Decisions were made.
And yeah, and people are complicated and like parents aren't perfect. And she's doing the best that she can for her. And Steve's life is completely fucking ruined by his shit stain of a father. And I wish that people, whether it be her or somebody else, had fought harder for Steve. I really do. Because then so much of this could have been avoided.
2020.
Exactly. Of course. So in May of 1983, Steve and his father returned to Minnesota from Texas. They had been in Texas where he met that neighbor, Charles Snow. He started to like get into guns, all this shit. They go back to Minnesota, and Jim is once again wanting to get back into dairy farming in Minnesota. So he wants to start up a new dairy farm. He and Steve rented a small farm near Hardwick in Rock County, which is like roughly 200 miles from their old farm. So not close. They did not go back to the same community.
Okay.
But he was unable to fund this new endeavor himself. So he fought financing or credit for the proposed operation from the many lending institutions and cattle lessors. But credit was repeatedly denied because he'd filed bankruptcy. He defaulted on a loan. Like, I don't know what he expected. You're not going to get a fucking loan.
No.
Quote, every time someone would ask about his credit, said a friend who asked to remain anonymous, everybody would refer them to the bank and they'd shut the door real quick like. So anytime he'd go to a bank to ask for financing, they'd take one look at his credit and it would be game over.
So he was not welcome in any store in the county.
No.
Okay.
September 27th, 1983, a cattle dealer called Rudy Blythe, the bank owner from his former community, to check on the credit rating of Jim Jenkins. An angry Rudy told him exactly what he thought of that fella, a blunt report that the cattle dealer passed on to Jim Jenkins as he flatly rejected his last hope of acquiring some cattle. So it's like, your credit sucks, and Rudy says you're a real piece of shit, so we're not going to do business with you. Bye-bye. The next day, a banker would inform Jim that his effort to negotiate the credit purchase of dairy cattle from a Long Prairie cattle dealer had failed. Steve said his father blamed his inability to get credit on the 1980 bankruptcy and on specifically banker Rudy Blythe, who he believed was giving him bad credit references, even though it's on his credit report that he defaulted on a loan and had to file bankruptcy.
It's not like a character witness. This is like, these are the numbers.
Yep. Susan Blythe, vice president of the bank and Rudy's wife, confirmed that her husband had told prospective lenders about Jenkins' bankruptcy when they asked for a credit reference. Quote, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, Jim got it in his head that all his marriage problems and his family problems were all Rudy's fault. That he was the one making it so tough for him, Mayor Birch said.
God.
Then he started it on the kid, saying it was all Rudy's fault, like planting this in Steve's head. He kept grinding that into Steve. Pretty soon, Steve believed that was what had happened. So Jim made Rudy the villain in their entire story and brainwashed his desperate for approval military and gun-loving son into believing it too.
I honestly don't see how this is going to go sideways.
This is bound to end well. Nothing to see here.
Special thanks.
Special thanks. The end. Everyone's fine.
God.
That would be amazing. Nah, everyone's not fine.
This is the Wine and Smiles podcast.
Smile and smile. True smile podcast. So after his final rejection for credit from the Long Prairie cattle dealer, Jim called Rudy at the bank, posing as a potential buyer named Ron Anderson. He said he was interested in buying up the old Jenkins farm. It made no economic sense, but Rudy was so delighted at the chance to dump the old place that his bank had acquired and hadn't been able to sell off. So he quickly agreed to meet, quote unquote, Ron out at the farm as he'd requested, instead of at the bank in town, which was customary. So fake Ron is like, no, I want to meet you at the farm. And Rudy's like, well, I'm just trying to fucking get rid of this, so I'm just going to agree. Fine. He wants to meet at the farm. We'll go meet at the farm. Talk about this.
Whatever.
So they agreed to meet at the old Jenkins farm at 10 o'clock the next morning. According to Steve, Jim told him, quote, we're going to go there and rob Blythe and scare the hell out of him. However, Steve would later admit to the jury that he was armed and prepared for some violent encounter, but denied the intention to murder.
It was just in case.
Just in case. The pair headed out to the farm early the next day with Steve driving. Inside the truck were 4 guns, a 12-gauge shotgun, a modified .410 shotgun, a .22 caliber pistol, and the gun later identified as the murder weapon, an M1 semi-automatic rifle.
Ooh.
There was ammunition, 2 knives, 3 diffused hand grenades.
What the fuck?
And assorted military equipment.
Men
all of this
need to fucking relax.
I couldn't agree more. And this is just such a clear cycle of violence. Like, Jim created the perfect circumstances for his son while simultaneously seeking any kind of affirmation, love, or approval from his own father. That kind of vulnerability leaves so many, specifically young men, yearning for structure, community, and like paternal guidance. And they get drawn into, say, the army. And
or
he
just
didn't
a
even
weird neighbor who used to be in the army.
Like, Steve didn't even go into the army. He just showed interest. He wanted to be like a little badass.
It was a fantasy.
Came under the wing of this Charles Snow guy who taught him everything he knew. And instead of going into the army, he just like fueled his own obsession with like guns. And it's not good. Like, Steve is a victim here, and he also is a violent criminal. Both things can be true.
Yeah, for like as problematic as like militarization just is, like systematic, like it just
in
at
general.
its core. I feel like these guys who have just the fantasy of being in the military are
without
so
any
much
of the
scarier.
structure or discipline of actually being in the military.
And all they want to do is like shoot guns and be a
Right.
big man. That's horrifying.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that his life would be so much better if he had gone into the military, but there at least would have been some fucking like rules, regulations, hierarchy, and safety protocols, things like that just were not in effect because he's just a kid, an 18-year-old kid who's in love with this dream of being a military man who got taken under the wing of like a retired veteran in the neighborhood who like taught him how to be a sharpshooter. And none of the manipulation and abuse that he was sustaining at the hands of his father was ever addressed, intervened. He had no opportunity to heal from that. And so when his dad is like, we're going to do this together, this guy ruined our life. He made your mom leave.
He wanted he wanted to be a partner. He wanted to be the person that his dad depended on for once.
Exactly. So of course Steve is going to be like, oh, my dad needs me?
Yeah.
For the first fucking time ever, I'm going to do whatever he says. It was just like, the psych in this case is so fascinating and so clear to me.
Yeah, and it's
wild.
pretty A to B to C.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need a degree to follow this one.
Sure don't. All of this equipment belonged to Steve, who said he habitually stored the weapons in the cab of the pickup truck, with the exception. So, like, he's saying, I always have this shit in my truck, except my M1 rifle, which I keep in the corner of my room at night, and I take with me in the truck whenever I leave the house. This claim is clearly made. And whether or not it's true that he always keeps that stuff in his truck, either way, he's saying that because he's trying to avoid the premeditated murder charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And I also like acknowledge that it's the 80s, it's the rural Midwest, people are going to have guns, etc. But like grenades, knives,
semi-automatic,
4 different guns.
It's grenades. I can't.
Well, and these, like the M1 semi-automatic rifle is not legal to hunt with. It's like, why the fuck would you have that? There's only one reason to have that, quote unquote, home defense. So, yeah, I don't know. So the next day, September 29th, 1983, a day and 4 years before my birthday. 8:30 a.m., Steve and Jim arrive at their old farm. Jim begins removing the truck that they drove, their front license plate. Steve took 3 guns from the truck, placed the .22 pistol on the seat, the M1 rifle, and the 12-gauge shotgun within reach on the hood of the truck.
Have fun trying to claim that this was not premeditated license plate. Are you fucking kidding? Jesus Christ.
As Jim began to remove the rear license plate, the pair heard a car come up the farm's driveway. And it was, they're there at like 8:30 in the morning, so it's still pretty long before 10 a.m. It's like almost 9 now. So they weren't expecting anybody to drive up. They're supposed to meet Rudy at 10. The pair each grabbed a gun and ran and hid, Steve hiding behind the garage. And it turns out it was Blythe. It's Rudy Blythe. His green station wagon pulled into the driveway, parking nose to nose with the Jenkins white pickup truck. Rudy Blythe and Toby Thullen got out of the car and began looking around, shouting, "Who's here?" Because they can see the truck. And Toby is a bank colleague of Rudy's. Within minutes, a second car, driven by Susan Blythe, Rudy's wife, pulled up into the farmyard.
Oh, my God.
Well, thank God nothing happens to Susan. But Susan had come to the farm to exchange cars with her husband. She needed the station wagon. Rudy told her he thought the white truck belonged to the Jenkins. Because they know them. They recognize the truck. They're on the old Jenkins farm.
It's
They're
a
like,
town
this
of
is
16 people.
pretty much. It's like, you're not going to pull one over on us, showing up in the whole family truck.
Yeah, to pulling your license plate off.
Yeah. Susan stood for a few minutes next to her parked car talking with Toby. As she talked with Toby, Rudy was poking around the farm investigating. She watched her husband walk past the station wagon, past the truck, and along the west side of the garage toward a grove of trees that grew behind the building. He didn't see anybody, and he walks back to where all three cars are parked. When Rudy returned to the car, he told his wife, Susan, like, get out of here. Go get the sheriff. There's trespassers on the property. I suspect it's Jim Jenkins. Susan Blythe drives away toward the nearest town, and as she's leaving, she sees her husband going back toward the garage, kind of grove of trees area, and Toby walking east away from the station wagon, also looking around. So they're splitting up and taking a look around the property. She drove 5 miles to Tyler, Minnesota to phone the local sheriff. Again, it's the 80s. They don't have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
At the same moment, another call would go to the sheriff. A passerby reported a man writhing in a ditch in front of the old Jenkins place.
Jesus Christ.
That man was Rudy Blythe,
Oh,
writhing in the ditch.
writhing in the ditch.
Yeah. He was wearing like a bright yellow raincoat, so he could easily be seen from the street. But unfortunately, like he doesn't survive. He doesn't make it. The physical evidence indicates that almost immediately after Susan Blythe drove away from the farm to fetch the police, a gunman stepped from behind the chicken coop and fired 3 shots from the M1 semi-automatic rifle at Blythe and Thulin. I'm sorry. I don't remember exactly how to pronounce it. They had apparently returned to the station wagon quite quickly because Susan saw them heading away from the car in the opposite directions as Susan left. And then I think they saw something threatening and were like running back toward the car.
Oh, God.
And so Toby made it into the car, but a bullet entered the front passenger side window vent and hit him in the neck, severing his spinal cord and killing him instantly.
Oh, Jesus.
Very precise shot.
Wow.
Thulin was a father of 3, a veteran, and had joined the bank as an employee only 10 months prior.
Oh, my God.
Literally survived war and was shot to death after 10 months of working for a fucking bank.
In a small town, Minnesota.
In rural Minnesota. Yep.
Oh.
In a town of, at the time, like 450 people.
That's
Yeah.
awful.
A second bullet was lodged in the car door on the side that Toby was sitting. So, like, both of these shots were absolutely, like, specifically trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And were well aimed and precisely fired.
Oh, my God.
One didn't hit him, but the other hit him so precisely in the neck that it severed his spinal cord.
That is why. That's like some sniper shit. Like,
yeah.
Close range.
It's terrifying. A third shot went through the front windshield, through the open driver's side window, and hit Rudy Blythe, who was crouching beside the driver's side door. He hadn't like made it all the way into the car, but like the door was open.
Mm-hmm.
And he's hiding. It hit him in the lower back.
Ooh.
The wound isn't fatal. Blythe is running. He runs at least 90 yards west, like going toward the road to get to help, run for his life. His path led through the farmyard, along a sidewalk south of the farmhouse, and across the front yard. The second of 4 shots hit him as he went into a shallow ditch that separates the front yard from County Road 7 that the farm was on. He was hit by all 4 bullets, shot from approximately, they think like 90 feet away. There were 4 shell casings in that area. So like not super close, but not, not super far. These aren't like point blank close range shots. These are targeted longer range shots.
Yeah.
2 bullets hit Blythe in the side very close together, causing fatal wounds. Another bullet hit Blythe's arm. The fourth passed through his jacket. So he was technically hit by all four. One didn't like lodge into him, but it went right through his clothes.
Uh-huh.
So he died in that ditch.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
That afternoon, sheriff's officers visited the home of Mr. Jenkins' elderly parents, Jim's parents. They found some spent .30 caliber carbine casings and a stuffed dummy dressed like a man that had been shot several times.
Oh,
Literally practiced
target
with
practice.
The casings matched the murder weapon. Someone's practicing with that gun.
Okay, this is obviously horrible, but I can't stop thinking about how fucking stupid these guys are.
Yeah. Jim, as the mastermind of all of this, is not well and not, for lack of a better word, executing this plan well.
No.
And I also think that is because I don't know if at the time he had fully made this decision, but I think that there was a part of him all along that wasn't expecting to live after this, whether that would be by his own hand or the
Some
police.
kind of shootout.
Yes. I don't have again, that's me speculating wildly. I don't have solid evidence to that fact. I just know that his mental state was very, very bad. He was not thinking clearly.
Or he was just so focused on killing Rudy and he didn't give a shit what else happened.
Yeah.
Or how obvious it was.
Rudy had been made in his mind the villain responsible for every bad thing that had happened to Jim in Jim's life. And so I think he was so fixated on this. And even after the satisfaction of killing him or whatever, realizes oh, that's not actually going to make all my problems go away. And now I have way more fucking problems than I had to begin with. What the fuck do I do? So what they first do is go on the run.
Oh, Natch.
Yep. They flee the farm. A witness saw their pickup, quote, screaming down the driveway around 9 a.m. So all of this happened really fast.
Before my alarm goes off, honestly.
Seriously. The father and son show up around 8:30. Blythe and Rudy and Toby are pulling up around 9, or not even, maybe 8:45. Susan comes up right after that, takes the other car. They know that something's off. She goes to call the cops. Basically the second she's off the property, it's going down.
Jesus Christ.
After leaving the farm, Stephen and his father, Jim, drove to Laverne, Minnesota, bought more ammunition, gasoline, and a flashlight, and they started for their home in Hardwick, Minnesota, which again is 200 miles away. They don't actually return home. Instead, they drive to South Dakota and then on to Texas, driving at night to avoid police detection. Again, in Laverne, they had stopped. They bought 100 rounds of hollow point .30 caliber carbine ammunition before leaving Minnesota. They stated that they were going hunting, even though, like I said earlier, this type of ammo, and I think that gun, is illegal for hunting. At the very minimum, the hollow point bullets at the time were illegal for hunting. They also bought shotgun ammo and a flashlight at another store in Laverne. They stopped at a junkyard to pull some new license plates. Quote, they pulled into a junkyard and swiped the plates off a white pickup truck and put them on theirs. I think they did this in South Dakota. Said, quote, people were looking for a white Chevy pickup with Texas plates because they had just recently moved back to Minnesota from Texas, but they had South Dakota plates on by then. So they stopped at a junkyard in South Dakota. That's how they got all the way to Texas without being pulled over.
Okay.
And it was, the one smart thing they did is if you're going to lift plates, at least lift plates off of a vehicle that looks very similar if it's not exactly the same car as yours. Because the vehicle that's registered to that plate being totally different is going to send up alarm bells.
I never thought about that.
Yep.
Okay.
I have. Anyway.
Why?
Just kidding.
Oh,
well,
okay.
My car's been towed for scofflaw many times in my past.
You are a scofflaw.
I'm a scofflaw. I was in my 20s and I didn't feel like paying my parking tickets. And I definitely paid for it later. So on the road, I think in Texas at this point, they encountered a Rock County deputy sheriff, Ronald McClure, who turned around and began following them closely because something wasn't right.
Ooh.
Stephen said his father told him to get out and shoot at the policeman. So they turn the truck onto a gravel road. Steven gets out with his M1 rifle and shoots 3 times at McClure's car as it passes an intersection. McClure, thinking quickly when he saw the gun, laid down in the seat, but like accelerated through the intersection so he wasn't hit.
Wow.
By any shots. I know, that was pretty fucking smart.
Yeah, but to your point earlier, it definitely sounds like they were planning on dying in some sort of police shootout. Like, they are playing it fast and loose right now.
Yeah, I don't think Steve is even thinking about this. He's just like, what Dad says, I'm just going to do. I'm just going to trust him.
Yeah.
And Jim, I don't think gives a fuck about his own life or his son's life.
Mm-hmm.
He's just absolutely playing it fast and loose. And I think he's like making decisions in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, Steve is just like traumatized, abused. Again, this doesn't absolve Steve of his role in this entirely, but it does kind of it explains it in my mind.
Yeah.
So they get away. They arrive in Paducah, Texas on Saturday, October 1st, 1983. On Sunday, October 2nd, after 4 days on the run, Stephen left his father at the abandoned farm where they were just hiding out and surrendered to Paducah police. He's like, this is not going to end well. I'm going to turn myself in. I'm done doing this. I'm done being on the road. Like, good for him. He said he was wanted in connection with some murders in Minnesota, and the pair had also run out of gas and any money. So, like, Steve knew, time's up. We're going to get caught. I'm just going to go fucking turn myself in. He tearfully said that his father had asked him to kill him. Jim asked Steve to kill him.
Oh, God.
He replied that he couldn't do that and that he told his father, you'll have to do that yourself, which I'm proud of him for doing that. When they talked in Texas about the shootings and about the father's wish to die, quote, that was the first time ever in my life that my father told me he loved me, Stephen said.
Wow. That's so sad.
It's really sad. Quote, his son came in saying they had run out of money and his father was talking about shooting himself, the sheriff in this town in Texas. By the time we got to the farm, the abandoned farm where they were hiding, he was dead. So he did shoot himself. Yep. Steve refused to shoot him, left to turn himself in. Jim shot himself. Stephen maintained that he remained hiding behind the garage during the events at the farm in Ruffton.
Okay.
And saw neither his father nor the victims until after the shootings. Though he stated that he did hear somebody say something about going to get the police and heard one car leaving. So probably Susan. However, he told police when he turned himself in that he had seen his father shoot Rudy and Toby. So there's conflicting stories here. And this will become an issue at trial because Stephen claimed that he hid behind the garage and stayed there. But then Susan Blythe, Rudy's wife, would testify that she saw her husband walking past the end of the garage right where Steve was saying he was hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no. If he had been there, Rudy would have seen him.
Yeah.
On that north end of the garage. So he either moved or he wasn't there in that area at all. And based on the evidence, including the testimony at trial, it's believed that since Rudy didn't see Stephen, he was not hiding where he claimed he was hiding in his statement. It's instead believed that he ran from behind the garage and around the chicken coop to avoid being seen by Rudy, which makes way more sense because Rudy and Toby are like going back and forth to the car, like, who's here?
Yeah.
Before they're essentially ambushed and chased down and killed.
Yeah.
Susan also testified to hearing a metallic noise that was later believed to be a pile of rain gutters being stepped on by Stephen as he moved location. And those rain gutters were not in the area that he claimed to be hiding. The location of those rain gutters and the sound that connects with what she heard supports the prosecution's theory that he was like skirting away from Rudy so that Rudy wouldn't see him.
Okay.
Almost immediately after Susan Blythe drove away, 3 shots were fired at Rudy Blythe and Toby Thulin, killing Thulin instantly and wounding Blythe. And as we know, then he ran and was chased down and shot. The first set of shots were fired from the corner of the chicken coop. So we know that someone, whether it was Steve or Jim, had to have fired those shots from that location. Jim's dead, so we can't confirm where he was. Steve's claiming that he was hiding.
I can't help but assume that all of the shots fired were fired by Steve.
That's a good assumption. And we will get to it.
Also, since Jim killed himself, Steve can blame whatever he wants on his dad because he's fucking dead.
Yeah, but the evidence is still the evidence.
Yep.
So Rudy Blythe fled toward the farmhouse front yard, and the killer followed. Blythe was shot 4 times and fatally wounded as he tried to reach the road, landing in a ditch adjacent to the road where he finally passed. Throughout the trial, Stephen would continue to assert that it must have been his father that fired the fatal shots, though he didn't see it from his hiding spot. So it was up to the jury and circumstantial evidence to decide who pulled the trigger. Was it Jim or was it Stephen? The case for Stephen is pretty damn solid. That Army veteran, Charles Snow, had trained Stephen how to shoot. It was testified that Stephen was a, quote, superb marksman, with one witness testifying that he had seen, quote, Stephen dance a tin can across a pond with the weapon. Like, he's seen him shoot that M1 so rapidly and with such precision that he got a tin can all the way across a pond. Now, whether that's like a colloquialism or actually what he saw, I don't know. I also don't care. It's to indicate that he's a really fucking good. It's like he could shoot a bug off a alligator tongue. Like, I don't know if it was like something like that.
On a Tuesday in March.
On a Tuesday in March.
With 40% humidity.
40%, 100%. Either way, the kid could shoot. Snow also taught Stephen the military skill of shooting accurately after running a distance, which I had never really thought about this, but this is like a very specific skill. To run quickly, stop, and shoot accurately is very hard because you're like breathing heavily and your body is a little bit dysregulated.
Yeah.
So it's something that they really have to train to do. This is a skill that Stephen worked at perfecting by frequent practice. Evidence at the crime scene indicated that the shooter would have run after Blythe approximately 90 yards before delivering the fatal shots from about 90 feet away.
And Jim's not going to do that. He's got retinopathy or whatever.
Oh, we'll get to the retinopathy. Diabetes clears another man's name. Even though, in the long and short of it, Steve, in my opinion, was the murder weapon for Jim.
Yeah.
And was manipulated into being the hitman for Jim's fucked up grievances against a man that had nothing to do with the shit going on in his life.
God.
And a man he'd never even met. Like fucking poor Toby had just started fucking working there.
He's like, who are we meeting here again?
Exactly. I can't. It's so shitty. In the months before the murder, after his return to Minnesota, Stephen had shot at least 500 rounds in target practice with the murder weapon, indicating familiarity with the M1's common malfunction. Okay, so this gun would often jam in semi-automatic mode, but could still be operated just fine manually, which is the harder way to operate the firearm.
But he could do it.
Yep. So he could do it. He was also particularly attached to the M1, keeping it close to him at all times. Would he have even let his father use it, knowing its quirks and knowing how precious it was to him? Stephen was also 18 years old, in great physical condition at the time of the murders. Jim, on the other hand, was 46 years old and physically limited not only by impaired eyesight, he had some mobility issues. So he also struggled from slowness and hesitancy in his movement. Some of that is from his eye issue because he has that diabetic retinitis pigmentosa. This is a progressive disease causing tunnel vision, night blindness, and eventually complete blindness. He's also, he's suffering from type 2 diabetes. He
was overweight.
He's overweight. He's not fast.
Yeah.
He's me.
Yeah.
He's me.
You can move quickly when you have to, but you're not going to
for like 3 minutes.
Chase someone down and then shoot them with accuracy with a automatic weapon.
Literally, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, would give up running for my life. I'm sorry, I would.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Yeah, and I'm not putting my mind to that.
Realistically,
it's not happening.
It's not
No, absolutely not.
I believe in you to a degree.
I don't. Do not put your money on this horse, girl. Not a safe bet. His
I'm
corrected
not
vision
expanding
was
my farm.
do not. Was 20% of normal in his right eye, which would be the eye that he would have to use to aim a weapon. It was 63% of normal in his left eye. So the right eye was worse than the left, but he would have been, the way that gun was built, you use the right eye to look through the scope. While Jenkins could see well enough to work, hold a driver's license only driving during the day, there's evidence his poor vision limited his mobility and made sighting and shooting a gun very difficult. For this evidence, they even exhumed Jim's body.
Oh.
Quote, they dug Jim up just to check his eyesight. They took his eyes out and said that there was no way he could see to shoot. And Stephen was right on with his shooting. Jesus. Oh, God, I'm burping thinking about the eyes coming out. I can't.
These eyes are way too decomposed to shoot a gun.
These eyes are crying.
Betty Davis eyes.
I can't. Recent associates described Jim as walking oddly, as if he had to feel his way along the ground with his feet because he couldn't see well.
Oh, God.
And he wasn't like stable on his feet. Could he have covered a 90-yard distance in pursuit of Rudy? There was testimony that his eyesight had recently prevented him from being able to use a mechanical gun sight like that on the murder weapon. In addition, Jenkins had not owned or shot a gun with any frequency for several years, although he may have received some training to shoot the M1 rifle while in the National Guard 20 years earlier. That doesn't seem very applicable in this scenario.
No.
Stephen said his father had practiced target shooting only a few times in the last 2 to 3 years and did not share his son's interest in guns. Jim's friend in Texas said he once saw him try to sight a shotgun, but he couldn't focus and said, quote, I can't see anything through it. Jenkins refused a deer hunting invitation from this same friend, claiming poor eyesight. Jenkins borrowed a shotgun for use in guard duty at his job in Texas, but returned it the next day saying, quote, I don't want to carry it because if I used it, I would get myself killed.
Oh.
So he's not on board with all the guns because he's nervous about using them. Understandably so. He's vision impaired.
How responsible of him.
I know, right? So I'll just manipulate my son into doing it for me. He's a very good shot. Physical evidence of the murders indicated the killer shot quickly and with great accuracy. Thulin was killed by one bullet through the neck. Then the killer chased Rudolph Blythe for 90 yards and shot again, hitting his target with all 4 bullets and placing 2 of those bullets, the fatal shots, within 1 to 1.5 inches of each other. So it's rapid fire and very close clusters. He's a really good shot.
Mm-hmm. That's terrifying.
Yep. There was evidence running and shooting diminishes the accuracy of marksmanship, and the less fit the shooter, the greater the impact of this strenuous maneuver. The shooter had to fire 1 deadly shot, then run nearly 100 yards before firing 4 more shots to kill the second man, to kill Rudy.
Can you imagine running 100 yards?
Oh, God, no. I would rather turn the gun on myself. There, I said it. Faced with this evidence, the jury could well have been forced to conclude, even against their natural sympathies, that Stephen, who was young, agile, skilled at running and then shooting, and an expert marksman with the M1 specifically, had to have shot Blythe and Thulin rather than Jim. There's just no fucking way that Jim pulled this off.
I agree.
He had limited mobility, a serious visual handicap, and rarely handled guns, and this was a skilled execution. There is just no physical fucking way that Jim did it himself. Stephen was convicted of first-degree murder in Rudy Blythe's death and second-degree murder in Toby Thulin. He would be sentenced to life in prison, but he was only 18, so he was eligible for parole after 17 years. And an odd detail that kind of supports my feeling that Stephen's mother really wasn't all that interested in like fighting for his son or for her son, because leading up to the trial and during the trial, Stephen lived with his defense attorney, Alan Anderson.
What?
In the months before the trial. And the attorney held Stephen's hand when the verdict of first-degree murder was announced. Oh and then within a few months after his conviction, but before his sentencing hearing, Steve's defense attorney adopted him. And Steve legally changed his name to Stephen Anderson.
Weird.
So, like, I don't think his mom was very present during the trial. He was just kind of left on his own after this really traumatic experience wherein his father manipulated him into being a murderer and then killed himself. And like, where's his mom?
So I
He gets adopted by his attorney.
That's really fucked up. And seems pretty unprofessional on the attorneys.
I mean,
however you frame that, but
who am I to judge as I judge? But like, it's odd, but it's a detail that really stuck out to me because of my previous feelings about both of these parents. I just do not think that Steve really had much of a chance, because I just think that he was harmed and manipulated and abandoned by the people that were supposed to care for him. And look where it fucking ended up.
It reminds me of, so I started Under the Bridge yesterday.
Oh!
And I am halfway through the last episode, so don't...
I won't say a goddamn
say anything,
word,
but
you need to call me after, or at least text me a lot.
But Rebecca, the author, having such simping over what's his name, Warren, is really fucking weird.
Yeah, it's because of her brother.
I know why.
Yeah,
but it's just like, oh, girl. No.
Yeah, it's kind of similar with the. It makes you wonder, like, okay, what's going on in Alan Swen Anderson Esquire's life that he's connect. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm glad that Stephen had somebody to actually care for and support him, because clearly without that,
well, he's a child.
He's a child. Clearly without that care and support and like actual structure and discipline, he's capable of some pretty fucking serious shit.
Yeah.
So if at the end of the day it benefited him and helped him to learn and move forward and reform, fine. I don't care who adopts him. I just think that I think that there are many victims in this case, and that Stephen is one of them. That's how I feel about this. It would take 17 years before Stephen would publicly admit that he was the one who pulled the trigger in a 2000 nationally televised documentary. He made no comment on the timing of this confession and this nationally syndicated show of remorse coinciding with his eligibility for parole, which would start after 17 years. But I actually don't think that's why he did it, because there's a quote from him here that moves me to believe that he did that. He did this for other reasons, and we'll get to it. So for the first few years, he said that he felt justified to continue to deny what had happened, because he still believed that like his dad had told him that Rudy was the cause of all of their trouble. So it's like he was still deprogramming. He could like deny his culpability, his
that
like
he
the
pulled
harm
the
that he had
trigger.
caused. Well, yeah, I mean, I think he accepted that, but he was like, well, Rudy deserved it. You know, like he was justifying it more than I would say denying it.
Okay.
Because he's like still programmed by his dad.
Yes, but now he's like detangling.
Exactly. He says, quote, I thought they were manipulating the case, but when I realized it was my dad who was the one manipulating me, all of my justifications were gone. Then I didn't want to think about it because I felt guilty. I murdered 2 men for the lies my dad told me. I had deprived 4 kids of their fathers and other people of their brothers, sons, and husbands. And I had not just deeply affected the families, but also colleagues and entire communities. People didn't even feel safe in their own homes. Stephen would say that the public admission finally allowed him to start healing. Quote, it forced me to look at my relationship with my dad and realize why I did what I did. It took a long time to just realize how that affected me, that someone you're supposed to love took advantage of you. Admitting that his father had abused his power and influence as a parent was a difficult thing to do, he said. Quote, it took a lot of soul searching, and there are still some things that I can't answer. My dad would have to, but he's, dead. I know now I was looking for my dad's love and for a normal relationship with him. Stephen also said that the families of his victims weighed heavily on him. In addition to his own hearing, he hoped to offer some healing for them. His mom, Darlene, so this is why I think he went on TV. And I don't know about the timing of it or what, but I do genuinely think that this is true. His mom, Darlene, said about the televised confession, quote, he wanted the families to know and to give them some kind of closure. Steve said, I'm sorry for what I did. It's just difficult to express remorse because I'm prohibited from having contact with the victim's family, and I wouldn't want to intrude in their lives. I have no idea what that would do to them, what kind of wounds that would reopen. So he can't reach out to them to apologize. So I think he agreed to do this interview because he's hopeful that they would watch it and see that he is sorry.
Yeah.
Which I understand.
Yeah.
Why he would want to put that out there. By all accounts, Stephen was a model prisoner, learning carpentry and upholstery while inside. Whatever job I had, he said, and I had a number of vocational jobs, and some where I would teach other people that job, I would throw myself into it. It became a mental escape for me. It gave me something to focus on.
Structure.
Yep. Literally, he like thrived in prison because there was some semblance of structure that didn't exist in his life at all.
Wow. He should have joined the military.
I honestly, he probably would have had a better outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, he would be moved into minimum security facilities and was also provided with the opportunity to participate in something called sentencing to service, which is like off-site work. Right now with STS, I go out into the community to build houses. I enjoy that. It's a good experience to go out into the community. Plus, I'm learning too. I hope to combine some of those skills, carpentry, upholstery, print production, and utilize them when I get out. In 2013, on the 30th anniversary of the killings, he reflected on his life and what the future holds. He said, quote, "I'm feeling very grateful for the opportunity to possibly return to society in a couple of years, but I can't forget the fact that I took 2 people's lives and destroyed 2 families. I have a debt that can never be repaid, but I do have a lot of remorse for the harm that I've caused." He would be denied parole multiple times, but in a twist, the lead prosecutor in his case, a man named Deputy Attorney General Thomas Fable,
adopted him again.
No, but he would become one of his biggest advocates for release on parole.
Oh, wow.
He said, obviously, it was tragic on all sides. It was tragic from the deaths of 2 good citizens, and both of whom left widows and children behind. That obviously is very, very sad. And sad from the perspective of a family that had gone through dysfunction and the involvement of a father and son in murder. Fable noted that it was clear that James Jenkins had a vendetta against Rudy Blythe and had distorted the truth to his son. And he testified that Steve had been taken advantage of, and while he was in prison, had taken advantage of every opportunity that existed in both terms of vocational training and also going through numerous programs, group sessions, therapy, sessions with psychologists, and a variety of writing exercises.
I mean, it does sound like he's done a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah, he had to deprogram himself from his father's fucking murderous manipulation. That's hard work.
Yeah.
Quote, "Stephen has become a very skilled carpenter and upholsterer. He's also developed unbelievable insight into both his misconduct and why all that happened. And he's also developed a very, very strong sense of remorse over the grief that he's caused. He's expressed that in writing on a number of occasions." Before he admitted it, Stephen had this sense of loyalty to his father, and the sense that what his father was wanting him to do was the right thing, Fable said. But he finally figured out that it just wasn't true, that his father had been deluded, and that his father had lied to him, and that his father had led him astray. And Stephen, over the years, has made a remarkable transformation, having gone from a young man who was completely under the domination of a hateful, spiteful, dysfunctional father into what I regard today as a responsible, intelligent adult who has every ability in the world to be a functioning and contributing citizen. So he was released on parole in 2015. I am grateful for that, and I hope that he is doing well. And I still hold that Stephen had and has the opportunity to live and turn his life around and make a positive impact on the world. And Toby and Rudy do not. And that is something that these families may never be able to accept, and they don't have to. We're complicated enough as human beings to hold multiple realities, and this is just all around an impossible fucking situation. It's awful. It's awful. This poor kid was absolutely used as a murder weapon by his dad. And
yeah,
there's no denying that he killed these 2 men. And that's it for them. They don't have a chance to do anything else with their lives. Their kids won't know them anymore. You know, it's like that shit is totally irreparable. So I really do understand if these families just can't accept this and have to find their own way.
That is entirely within their rights and understandable.
Yep. So I hope the best for them, all of the families left behind. And I, at the same time, hope the best for Stephen and hope that he can, live out the rest of his days in a healthy and, safe way.
Yeah. I think that rehabilitation is never a bad thing. So yeah, kudos for him to him for doing what
Doing the
appears to
work.
be a lot of inner work while he's in prison.
Yeah, if you're going to be in there, I mean, at least he turned inward and committed. And, that's not easy work either.
He did the time. He didn't let the time do him.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So to this day, there's a small memorial for Blythe and Thulin that Mayor Birch saw erected. Quote, they gave their lives for this little community, Birch said. The least we could do is recognize them. That's my feeling anyway.
Yeah.
And that's my case.
Jesus Christ.
I know, it's wild, right?
There's
it's a lot.
so much going on.
So much. Farm crisis, babe.
Yeah.
It all connects.
Well, this was a dynamic episode, and
Yeah, I learned a lot.
I'm glad I put it on the calendar like 6 fucking months ago and then totally forgot about it till
Me too.
last week.
Love that for you.
Well, thank you all for listening, and maybe look into hiring a financial advisor, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Wine and Crime. Our cover art is by Danielle Sylvan. Music by Phil Young and Corey Wendell. Editing by Jonathan Camp. Our production manager is Andrea Gardner. For photos and sources, check out our blog at wineandcrimepodcast.com. You can follow us on all the socials at Wine and Crime Pod. If you have questions, answers, or recommendations to share, email us at wineandcrimepodcast@gmail.com. Episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. It is the best way to spread the word. If you'd like to show your support and get access to all sorts of wine-fueled bonus content, visit our Patreon page. Cheers!
There's a place in the Blue Ridge Mountains where a designated American viticultural area produces wines as unforgettable as the views. To learn more about the crest of the Blue Ridge wine country, click this banner and find your mountain moments in Hendersonville, North Carolina.